I'm sure we've all experienced that pesky check engine light go off on our dashboards. We go into a panic, and some people, they might opt to buy this code reader to save some money and maybe do the work themselves. Well, our auto man, Brian Bowersock, is here to tell us why that may not be a good idea. Good morning.
Good morning. That may not be a great idea. You're right. So this morning we're talking about how a lot of consumers or drivers tend to think we just plug into a vehicle and it tells us what's wrong with the vehicle. And that couldn't be further from the truth, to be honest with you. When you do plug in a vehicle, you get information that tells you a system that's picked up a fault. So what we wanted to kind of talk about this morning is how replacing parts by that usually ends up just costing you a lot more money and can aggravate the problem and won't fix the problem.
Because when there's a problem with one system, it may be related to a bigger problem.
You're right. Or the system may be just picking up the problem and its sensors don't have a problem. Its sensors have actually picked up, hey, there's excess fuel in the exhaust or whatever, and there's not a problem with those sensors. So you go replace them, it doesn't do any good. And on today's cars, I mean, you start talking about air-fuel ratio sensors, things like that, they're $300-$400 a piece. That's a lot of money to spend.
Right.
You know, so what we're really talking about this morning is how the best money you'll ever spend is when you spend it on a qualified technician to diagnose your vehicle properly.
What are some of the parts that you see people like, well, I try to replace this and it just kept coming on?
Oxygen sensors and air-fuel ratio sensors are a big thing. EGR valves also. Folks just tend to replace them and think it's going to fix the problem, and it doesn't. Because a lot of times you'll have, such as an EGR problem, a plugged passage or something else that's gone wrong, or a driver for the EGR valve, and it just, replacing the valve doesn't do any good because they don't fail a whole lot. One of the big things that we do at the West Automotive Group a lot is educating folks on this and talking to them and explaining to them why and how we go through this process to actually diagnose. So you scan the vehicle, retrieve the code, then you start all your pen testing. And that's where a qualified technician comes in really handy, because he can pen test down through all the values and figure out this is a component that's not working properly. We need to replace this and recheck, but we know it's bad when we replace it.
Right. And you may make the mistake of, if you do try to do it yourself, replacing something that doesn't need to be replaced instead of something next to it. Or
the other thing that we've seen is replacing a good component with a substandard component and creating a bigger issue. Now we have two issues on the vehicle, and so we have to go through and diagnose that problem and go on to the next problem that it actually started with. So often we'll say is sometimes the hardest problems to diagnose are ones that are created by people, not by the car.
Right. So when you're trying to save money, you're actually probably making the problem worse. So save yourself some money and talk to a qualified technician.
Absolutely. Get into a great AAA approved repair facility and get your car diagnosed properly, and you will save money in the long run.
All right. Brian Bowersock, thank you for being with us.
Always glad to be here, as always.
All right. When we return,